Brian, do you think Israel should be competing at this year's Eurovision?
Well, I think it's very confusing behaviour from Eurovision. They already banned, Russia and Ukraine war. So I thought, OK, we've set a precedent now. So I just expected Israel to be banned. I really did. So I'm very confused at their behaviour. I'm not a fan of banning, generally speaking, but at the same time, kids are still being murdered from the sky. In Gaza, it's still going on. The whole thing is hideous. So I can understand that because Eurovision is one of the biggest live events the planet will ever see, then why not use it as a way to speak to the world? Absolutely, I think they should.
So there have been calls for protests to happen while the the Israeli entry, Yuval Raphael, is competing tomorrow evening in the semi-final for people to kind of stage a silent protest, people even to boo. Would you be a fan of that?
Not at all. That's not fair on the participant. That's horrible. I mean, who knows where her politics lie? And by then, the horse has bolted. It's a ridiculous thing to do and very insulting towards her. Also, let's not forget, just because somebody is pro-Palestine, they're not anti-Semitic. I know loads of Israeli people who are mortified by what's going on. So it's like saying all Israeli people, are anti-Palestine. It's just not true.
Alan, what did you make of the intervention of the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, who the language they used was there's a moral obligation to suspend Israel from the competition?
Well, it was RTE's NUJ, National Union of Journalists. I'm not surprised because that group have taken a negative attitude towards Israel for many years, but it is inappropriate because RT is the national broadcaster. RT journalists are supposed to be objective, and it raises serious questions around programmes like Prime Time and RT News Bulletins when it comes to presenting the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I think there's one very particular thing about this Eurovision, and I'm saddened by Brian's attitude because people like to talk in neutral terms about Israel this, Israel that. This is a contest involving individuals selected by the public broadcasting channels within each of their countries. Can is the public broadcasting channel in Israel. It's independent from government. It's basically Israel's version of RTE. And in fact, it irritates the Israeli government so frequently on issues of controversy that there's a big debate within Israel's right-wing government about the future funding of Can. Now, Yuval Raphael is a very particular and special individual. She was present in the Nova Music Festival, at which Hamas slaughtered 364 young people on the 7th of October 2023. They abducted 40. And she only survived by hiding in a bomb shelter with 50 others and ultimately survived below their dead bodies, including dead bodies of her friends, as Hamas threw grenades and shot bullets into this bomb shelter. I think she's an extraordinary individual of courage and resilience. And frankly, I think it's despicable that she should be targeted in this way. She should be a welcome person in the Eurovision Song Contest. And indeed, there's no relationship between Can and the Israeli government, which reflects the relationship between the Russian broadcasting station and the Russian government, because the Russian government effectively controls that
in fairness to Brian, he did acknowledge that it was utterly unfair on the participant herself for it to be any sort of protest.
Too little, too late.
The debate has been about the participant. In practical terms, who is participating? Yuval Raphael, a survivor of a huge, enormous atrocity, the worst atrocity at a music festival in global history. And I would expect someone like Brian, a brilliant musician, a composer, a singer, someone I have great respect for, to actually recognise the reality that this is a courageous young woman who should not be targeted. No responsibility, whether you support or don't support the Israeli government. She's no responsibility for their policies.
We agree on that.
And the final point to make about it, she is one of the people who, like so many thousands of Israelis in Israel, have been seeking to get the hostages or campaigning for hostages to be released from Gaza, where there remain 58 hostages, 23 believed to be alive. The rest are bodies of those killed by Hamas.
To your point that she's selected by Can, the Israeli equivalent of RTE, and this has nothing to do with the Israeli state. I mean, on the face of it, that may be true, but she is representing Israel as a country. You don't get 12 points to Can, 10 points to RTE, 8 points to the BBC. The points are for the country and its national flags. Regardless of the selection process, there's an element of national representation.
There is, but I don't think anyone would suggest because they are appalled by the policies of the current Irish government in some particular area, that RTE's nominee to participate in Eurovision
RTE aren't murdering people in Palestine. How can you say that?
Let's debate the Gaza-Israel war
Let's
on a separate
Let's not. We're debating Eurovision. That's what we're debating at the moment.
What we're debating is Yuval Raphael, a 24-year-old woman who lay under dead bodies for 8 hours trying to survive as Hamas barbarians murdered 364 young people, abducted 40, some of whom currently remain in Gaza.
Louise, do you have a problem with the participation of Yuval Raphael in the competition?
I have a problem with the participation of Israel and the attempt by anybody to music wash this genocide. I absolutely do. And I don't think this is about any one individual. In fact, I think this decision should have been taken by the European Broadcasting Union, because let's not forget, it was the European Broadcasting Union that quite rightly expelled Russia from the competition when they invaded Ukraine. The same should happen. We are watching a genocide in front of our eyes. You can't open your phone without seeing it. You can't turn on the television without seeing it. It is a genocide. Tens of thousands of people have been absolutely slaughtered, and in no way, shape, make or form should Israel be allowed to participate in the Eurovision Song Contest.
What has one got to do with the other?
Because they will play and perform under the flag of Israel. So the European Broadcasting Union, as did FIFA, UEFA and others, when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, they expelled Russia. So the same should happen for Israel. There should not be any tolerance or any place for that genocidal regime in what is essentially a cultural and a musical event.
And in your mind, Yuval Raphael represents, as you would describe it, a genocidal regime when she stands up on stage and sings.
Israel are committing genocide. I'm telling you now, it should
not.
You've asked me a question, you've asked me a question, and I want to answer
she
it.
Represents
it should not
a
be
genocidal regime.
It should not be left to one individual person, or indeed to RTE or to any other broadcaster. The European Broadcasting Union should have shown the courage and determination that they showed when Russia invaded Ukraine, and the same treatment should apply. Tens of thousands of men, women and children have been absolutely slaughtered, and in no way, shape, make or form should we allow the participation of Israel in a music contest. Not at all.
Minister, do you have a personal problem with Israel's participation in Eurovision?
I think it's important to acknowledge why there is so much public debate about this, and it is because of the atrocities that are happening in Gaza to the people of Palestine. And I absolutely acknowledge as well what happened on the 7th of October 2023, which was completely wrong, and I think started off this whole conflict. But we need to be, I suppose, cognizant as well in relation to, I suppose, the role of the European Broadcasting Union. As Louise has said, it is they will decide who enters and who cannot.
Do you think they were hypocritical to kick Russia out?
I think that is a matter for the European Broadcasting Union. It is not a matter for
the European Broadcasting Union is whether to kick them out. I asked you whether you think it's hypocritical. It's not a matter for the EBU whether you think it's hypocritical.
What I think is the cause of the Palestinian people is not going to be advanced one iota by boycotting a country like Israel. What we as a government and what we're focusing on is using all the levers that we have and using the influence that we have at a European level, at an international level, to try to end this war, to increase the humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, to work for a two-state solution. That's what we can do.
Was the cause of the Ukrainian people advanced by Russia not being allowed to participate?
Again, that's a matter for the European Broadcasting Union.
No, that's not.
But governments
whether they're
don't
allowed
decide.
to participate is a matter for the EBU. Yeah. My question to you is whether you think the cause of the Ukrainian people was advanced. Your argument against an Israeli expulsion was that the cause of the Palestinian people wouldn't be advanced.
Exactly. So
was the cause of the Ukrainian people advanced by Russia being kicked out?
I don't believe so. And we know what's happening with Zelensky, with Trump, with the negotiations for peace in Ukraine. It's about world leaders, I'm talking now from a political point of view, coming together and working to make sure that we can restore peace in Ukraine. So it's the same. My point here is that the Eurovision, the matter here is a matter for the European Broadcasting Union. By boycotting or saying that a particular country cannot participate in a Eurovision Song Contest is not going to advance the cause of the Palestinian people. But that's not... at the same time, we have to acknowledge the atrocities there, the humanitarian aid, which is not getting into Gaza, the huge atrocities, the killings that are happening. And what we need to do is work towards peace.
Louise?
Humanitarian, please, Hildegarde, call it for what it is, right? Humanitarian aid not getting into Gaza. That's children starving and dying, OK? So let's not try and put a gloss on it. I don't believe, by the way, I don't believe that Russia should be allowed back into this competition. And I think that it is important that people take a stand. And, you know, like, we're only a small country, right? We are only, but we can have a massive influence. We showed that when we stood up against apartheid, when the women in Dunnes Stores refused to handle South African fruit. They started and they became part of a massive global
Would you have
movement.
liked to have seen some of the individual members of the Irish delegation take that stand personally?
I don't think it's fair to leave it up to them. I think it is
Agreed.
for the European Broadcasting Union. I don't think it's fair to make it up to leave it up to any one individual. I think the EBU, and it is hypocrisy.
But those Dunnes Stores women, those were individual women who made that call.
And indeed they did. But it is hypocrisy of the highest order to, in one breath, say, well, because of the illegal invasion of Ukraine, well, then Russia cannot participate. And that's right. But it is utterly hypocritical to then turn around and say, but then it is OK for Israel, who are in the process of committing a genocide. And we shouldn't be afraid to use that word, because that is what it is. It is hypocritical to not treat them the same as Russia. And there shouldn't be any participation in this attempt to music wash this genocide.
Of course, there's a fundamental problem with this narrative. And it's a problem with the narrative that has contaminated the whole country and has been propagated all the way through from our public broadcasting services to every level within Irish politics. Three very simple things about this conflict. Firstly, it would never have taken place if Hamas had not attacked Israel. There's no similarity between Russia attacking Ukraine and Israel's position. Israel was the state that was attacked. Israel was attacked effectively by the government of Gaza that went to war. The attack didn't stop on the 7th of October. Thousands of rockets for the following 18 months were fired out of Gaza into Israel.
Do you think it started on the 7th?
So this war started on the 7th, and we can get into the history, but I'm sure you don't have time. But this war and the atrocities that took place, 1,200 people massacred, took place on the 7th. The war, the second point that is always missed in these conversations, is this war would be over and could have been over long ago if Hamas released all the hostages.
This is not a blame game. You can't say that.
No, to this day,
it's illegal occupation is what we're talking about.
Brian, I didn't interrupt you.
I know, but you're making me angry, so forgive me for being a human being.
No, to this day, Hamas refused to release hostages. If all of the hostages were released, you could absolutely be certain the war would be over. Third problem is this. The third problem is that Hamas is continuing the war because it wants to resume its brutal rule of Gaza. Hamas has promised openly and publicly to, again, repeat the atrocities of October 7. And there are people now in Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, protesting against Hamas. Some are being kneecapped, some have been shot, and there isn't a single voice within the political echelon within this country who's speaking out on behalf of Palestinians in Gaza who need to be freed effectively from Hamas.
Who's bombing the children?
Well, but that's not true.
Right now.
It is absolutely true.
Nobody in the political echelons of this country have condemned Hamas.
No, I didn't say that. I said the focus is always demonising Israel. The focus isn't on telling Hamas to end the war, release the hostages, and don't resume your brutal rule of Gaza.
But the Taoiseach repeats ad nauseum when the opportunity presents itself that the hostages should be released and condemns Hamas. And arguably, Israel gets more attention from the Taoiseach because there's 50,000 dead people in Gaza.
What the Taoiseach ignores, what the Taoiseach repetitively ignores, what the Taoiseach repetitively ignores, is that Hamas isn't simply a local terrorist organisation. It's sponsored by Iran, who trains it, funds it. We have an Iranian embassy in Dublin. On no occasion.
That's a separate issue.
No, it isn't.
No, you're moving the goalposts.
No, I'm not moving the goalposts. If Ireland truly, or Sinn Féin truly, want to do something to end the conflict, demand of the Iranian ambassador in Dublin that he goes back to Tehran and ask the Tehran government to tell Hamas to release the hostages.
It was nobody in the political echelons condemns Hamas. Then it was, no, they do condemn Hamas, but they fixate too much on Israel. And then actually, when I put it to you, that the reason they fixate on Israel is because of the amount dead in Gaza, it's actually about Iran. That's moving the goalposts twice there.
Well, it's very straightforward. Iran constantly calls for the destruction of Israel. Iran funds Hamas, Iran funds Hezbollah and the Houthis, calls them the axis of resistance, and has encouraged the continuation of this conflict. And this conflict could be rapidly ended if either Hamas voluntarily released all the hostages, or if Iran ordered Hamas to release all the hostages.
Fionnan, despite the seriousness of the context, on some level, I kind of find it silly that we're projecting politics onto the Eurovision Song Contest of all things.
Well, you wouldn't start from here either. I mean, I know you started the conversation by asking about the calls for Israel to be expelled and the origin of them within Ireland. And that was only happening last week. You know, the Eurovision semi-final number 2 is on tomorrow night, where Raphael will be contesting. So there was no way it was going to happen in that short period of time.
So why did they do it, do you suspect?
Well, because it's topical things become topical around the event. I mean, this call wasn't made 2 months ago when the Irish entry was picked. In reality, it should have been on. If it was going to be on the table, you should be putting it on for the last year. The EBU have very successfully, and RTE the same, said, what's another year? They've just pushed it on and basically said, we're going to have a discussion. But you're kind of going, okay, if you're going to have a discussion about Israel's participation in the first place, you're actually admitting that you feel there is some problem that you have to discuss. So the EBU and RTE will basically kick it on for another year. Neither a performer nor a broadcaster is boycotting themselves in their own right. They are proceeding along. By all accounts, the situation in Basel isn't quite as tense as it was in Malmo last year, for whatever reason. They'll get through tomorrow night. The Israeli entry will likely get into the final. They'll get through Saturday night. Anti-booing technology being used, restrictions on flags and so on, and then try and see how they're fixed next Monday morning.
Brian, you've made the point a few times that it's unfair to kind of foist all of this onto the shoulders of any one individual person. Would you like to see an RTE as an organisation take a stand and say, we're not going to broadcast it, we're not going to take part?
Absolutely, and how brave that would have been to do that. You know, it would have really shown strength going forward. Look, I come from Northern Ireland, I come from West Belfast. What a mess people made of that. And when we looked around for help, nobody helped us necessarily in the way that people are helping now, you know, from here. I continually meet people who've never been to Northern Ireland before, you know, and all of that. But so I've got a wee bit of PTSD about it, honestly, when I'm looking at the news. I was saying this earlier in the green room, you know, I remember what it's like to be taken out of my bed during the night and brought with the neighbours up to the local schools. I saw people shot dead in front of me. I saw people blown up. I've seen all these things with my own eyes, and this is the country that we live in. So I get very, you know, PTSD about it when we're talking about these things.
But see, Brian, that's why.
Yeah.
Coming from your insights and expertise, a bit like Bono as well, I would have expected you would have some level of sympathy for those who were massacred in the Nova Music Festival. 364 young people.
Exactly.
Let's park the other almost 1,000 others who were murdered. But 364 young people at a music festival, in which they were dominated by what they call in Israel peaceniks, those who look for peace.
I'm thinking about those little murdered kids where their dads were carrying them in 2 bits, you know, two broken little boys and girls. That's what I'm thinking about.
I think of them as well. And
being at a music festival is more of a privilege, I think, in a war situation.
Well, you see, there wasn't a war, so they deserve to die.
It's called a war. Don't be afraid to use the word.
No, did they deserve to die?
People never called Northern Ireland a war either. Stop being afraid of using the word war. It's a war.
Straightforward question.
It's a genocide and it's a war. That's what it is.
There was no war on the 6th of October. On the 7th of October... I
just don't think you understand what war is.
On the 7th of October...
Go home and look up the word war.
On the 7th of October, 364 young people were murdered in the Nova Music Festival.
Of course, it's
and 40 were abducted.
It's awful.
Do you think they deserve that?
No one deserves to be murdered. No one.
I agree.
Especially not little kids
in
Gaza. No one deserves to be murdered.
Yeah, but you see, you won't categorically condemn what happened to young Israeli people between the ages of about 16
I won't get on your bus. I'm just not getting on your particular bus. That's
the bus
all.
is very simple.
Yeah.
The bus is what we need is this terrible war to end.
Of course we do.
need an end to conflict.
And stop playing the blame game. You keep wanting to, push the blame in one direction. War is about two different factions, right?
Yeah, but
it's now out of control. People used to do it with Catholic and Protestants in the north. I've heard this rhetoric over and over again, and it doesn't forward us. It really doesn't. It just doesn't.
There is a minor problem.
There's a major problem.
No,
You're talking about minor problem.
The minor problem is Hamas is prepared
You're obsessed with Hamas.
Yes, because Hamas rule Gaza. Hamas started this conflict. Hamas
we
won't
don't
end
agree.
the conflict.
Let's agree to disagree.
Hamas hold all the hostages.
Yeah. And no one from Israel murdered anybody.
Has
is that what you're saying?
its power to end the conflict.
All right. Yeah. I think this is going to continue, without any resolution. Louise, before we wrap things up, would it have any practical impact on the lives of people in Gaza or the West Bank or anywhere in Israel if Ireland were to take a stand?
At the moment, Israel is doing what they're doing, and it's a genocide because there are no consequences. So what would have an impact if the government were to fast-track the Occupied Territories Bill, if they were to pass...
I mean, Ireland not sending a Norwegian
We're doing that.
If they were to pass Sinn Féin's illegal... If they were to pass Sinn Féin's illegal settlements bill as well. So there has to be consequences. And Israel will continue to do what they do until there are consequences. There has to be consequences.
You're not suggesting a Norwegian representing the Irish RTE in Basel is a consequence.
At the moment, there are no consequences, OK? So what should happen... What should happen... I'm not saying start small. I'm saying pass the Occupied Territories Bill. But also the European Broadcasting Union need to stand up and treat Israel the same as they treated Russia.
We are progressing the Occupied Territories Bill. We have to work as well with our European colleagues in relation to ending this war, working towards a two-state solution. They're the levers we have, and Ireland has been at the forefront in relation to this.
And on that note, my thanks